Have you ever noticed that the people who seem the strongest rarely say much? They walk into a room and somehow command attention without demanding it. They don't rush to explain themselves. They don't argue endlessly. They don't react to every insult, every criticism, every opinion thrown their way. Yet people remember them. People respect them. People wonder about them. And that raises a question most people never stop to ask. What if the very thing you've been taught to do your entire life, constantly explain yourself, defend yourself, prove yourself, is actually making you weaker? Imagine for a moment that everything changes when you stop talking so much about your plans, your emotions, your frustrations, and your need to be understood. Imagine that the moment you stop chasing validation is the moment you become impossible to manipulate. Most people fear silence because silence feels empty. But the Stoics understood something that modern society has forgotten. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is power hidden in plain sight. And by the end of this video, you may realize that some of the biggest mistakes you've made in your relationships, your career, and your personal growth all started the moment you spoke, when you should have remained silent. Many years ago, there was a man who constantly felt overlooked. At work, he fought to make people notice his value. In conversations, he tried to prove how much he knew. Around friends, he explained every decision he made because he wanted approval. Every criticism felt like an attack. Every disagreement became a battle he felt obligated to win. He believed strength meant speaking louder, explaining more, and defending himself against every challenge. Yet despite all his effort, people respected him less than he expected. They listened politely, but rarely took him seriously. They knew exactly how to trigger him because he revealed all his weaknesses through constant reactions. Then something unexpected happened. One day he became exhausted, tired of arguing, tired of proving, tired of chasing recognition. So he began saying less. Not because he was afraid, not because he had given up, but because he realized most conversations were not opportunities to gain respect. They were opportunities to lose it. Slowly he stopped explaining every choice. He stopped defending himself against opinions that did not matter. He stopped responding instantly when people provoked him. And something strange happened. The less he reacted, the more powerful he appeared. The less he sought validation, the more respect he received. People who once ignored him began paying attention. People who once challenged him became cautious. What changed was not his status, his intelligence, or his appearance. What changed was his relationship with silence. The average person cannot tolerate silence because silence forces them to confront themselves. Think about how quickly people reach for their phones when there is nothing to distract them. Think about how uncomfortable many become during a pause in conversation. Think about how often people talk, not because they have something meaningful to say, but because they are afraid of what silence might reveal. Yet this fear creates weakness. A person who cannot sit with silence becomes dependent on noise. And anyone dependent on noise becomes easy to control. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. He knew that true strength came not from controlling others, but from controlling yourself. When someone insults you, your first instinct may be to respond. When someone doubts you, your first instinct may be to defend yourself. When someone misunderstands you, your first instinct may be to explain. But every instinct is not wisdom. Many instincts are simply emotional reactions disguised as necessity. The Stoics believed that freedom begins the moment you stop obeying every impulse. Silence becomes powerful because it creates space between stimulus and response. It gives you the ability to choose rather than react. And that single ability separates the strong from the weak more than almost anything else. Consider how many regrets in life begin with words spoken too quickly. An angry message sent in frustration, a secret shared with the wrong person, a promise made under emotional pressure, a harsh response during an argument. Most people have experienced moments when they wished they could take their words back. Very few have experienced moments when they wished they had spoken sooner during emotional chaos. This is because words carry consequences that silence often avoids. The Stoics taught that before speaking, you should ask whether your words improve upon silence. If they do not, silence is usually the wiser choice. Yet modern culture encourages the opposite. We are told to constantly share our opinions. We are encouraged to respond instantly. We are praised for broadcasting every thought and emotion. But wisdom has never been measured by volume. Wisdom is measured by judgment. And judgment often begins with restraint. Imagine standing beside a deep lake early in the morning. The water is calm, still, undisturbed. Because of its stillness, it reflects everything clearly. Now imagine that same lake during a storm. Waves crash, water churns, the reflection disappears. This is exactly what happens to the human mind. When constantly reacting, constantly talking, constantly defending itself, the mind becomes turbulent. It loses clarity. It loses perspective. It loses power. Silence restores stillness, and stillness restores vision. This is why some of the most effective leaders in history were not the loudest people in the room. They observed more than they spoke. They listened more than they argued. They understood that information is power, and that constant talking often means giving away information while receiving very little in return. There is another reason silence is so powerful, and most people never recognize it. Silence creates mystery. Human beings are naturally curious. When someone constantly reveals every thought, every plan, and every emotion, there is little left to discover. But when someone speaks carefully and selectively, people become intrigued. They pay attention. They wonder. They listen more closely. This is not manipulation. It is psychology. People value what is rare. And in a world overflowing with endless noise, genuine silence has become rare. The Stoics understood that your energy is limited. Every unnecessary argument drains it. Every pointless explanation consumes it. Every emotional reaction weakens it. The person who protects their energy gains an advantage that others cannot see. While everyone else is exhausting themselves trying to be heard, the silent individual is building strength. Think about the people who have hurt you most in life. Think about the betrayals, disappointments, and moments of disrespect. How many times did those situations become worse because you reacted emotionally? How many times did anger push you into saying things that gave others more power over you? When emotions run high, silence becomes a shield. Not because silence solves every problem, but because it prevents temporary emotions from creating permanent consequences. Seneca warned repeatedly about the dangers of anger. He understood that anger often feels powerful while actually making us vulnerable. A person consumed by emotion becomes predictable. A predictable person becomes controllable. But a person who remains calm and silent forces others into uncertainty. They cannot predict your next move. They cannot easily manipulate your emotions. They cannot use your reactions against you. This is why silence often unsettles people. When someone expects a reaction and receives none, they lose their leverage. They become uncomfortable because they can no longer control the direction of the interaction. Have you ever noticed how some people become more aggressive when you refuse to engage in drama? It is because drama requires participation. Conflict requires fuel. Silence removes that fuel. And once the fuel is gone, many conflicts collapse under their own weight. The Stoics were not passive people. They did not avoid action. They simply understood that not every battle deserves their attention. They knew that every moment spent fighting meaningless battles was a moment stolen from meaningful goals. Perhaps the greatest misunderstanding about silence is the belief that it represents weakness. Many people assume that if you are silent, you are afraid. If you do not defend yourself, you have lost. If you do not react, you are powerless. But true silence is not surrender. True silence is choice. There is a difference between being unable to speak and choosing not to speak. One comes from fear. The other comes from strength. Anyone can react. Anyone can argue. Anyone can lose control. It takes discipline to remain composed when emotions are pulling you in another direction. It takes confidence to stop seeking approval. It takes wisdom to recognize that not every opinion deserves your response. Epictetus taught that we should focus only on what we can control, Yet most people spend enormous amounts of energy trying to control how others see them. They want everyone to understand them. They want everyone to approve of them. They want everyone to agree with them. This endless pursuit creates suffering because other people's thoughts are not under your control. No amount of explaining can guarantee understanding. No amount of defending can guarantee respect. No amount of arguing can force agreement. The Stoic solution is simple but difficult. Stop trying to control what cannot be controlled. Let your actions speak louder than your explanations. Let your character speak louder than your arguments. Let your results speak louder than your promises. And here is where silence begins to transform from a habit into a superpower. When you stop wasting energy on proving yourself, that energy becomes available for growth. When you stop reacting to every criticism, your focus returns to your purpose. When you stop explaining every decision, you begin living with greater certainty. Slowly, you realize that much of your exhaustion was never caused by work, responsibility, or challenges. It was caused by the endless effort of managing other people's perceptions. The moment you release that burden, something remarkable happens. You become lighter, stronger, clearer, more focused. And the people around you notice the difference long before you say a word about it. But there is a deeper layer to this lesson that most people never discover. Silence does more than protect your power. It reveals the truth about the people around you. And once you see that truth, you can never unsee it. The next lesson will show why silence acts like a mirror that exposes intentions, uncovers hidden motives, and changes the way others treat you forever. Most people spend their entire lives trying to understand others by listening to what they say. The Stoics knew there was a far more effective method. Instead of focusing on words, they focused on behavior. And silence is what allows you to see behavior clearly. The moment you stop filling every gap in a conversation, stop rescuing awkward moments, and stop speaking simply to keep interactions alive, something fascinating happens. People begin revealing themselves. They tell you who they are without realizing it. Their insecurities surface. Their intentions become visible. Their character becomes impossible to hide. Silence has a way of making masks fall off. This is one of the reasons powerful people often listen more than they speak. They understand that every conversation contains valuable information, but only those who remain calm enough to observe can actually collect it. Think about how often people expose their true nature when given enough space. Someone who constantly seeks attention eventually reveals their need for validation. Someone driven by jealousy eventually exposes their resentment. Someone who is dishonest eventually contradicts themselves. But if you are always talking, always reacting, always trying to direct the conversation, you miss these signals. Silence creates room for observation. Observation creates understanding. Understanding creates advantage. This does not mean becoming cold or detached from humanity. It means becoming aware. Most people are so busy trying to be understood that they never take the time to understand others. As a result, they repeatedly trust the wrong people, enter the wrong relationships, and follow the wrong advice. Silence slows the process down. It allows you to see reality instead of simply reacting to appearances. There is a reason experienced negotiators often remain silent after making an important statement. They know that silence creates pressure. Human beings are naturally uncomfortable with uncertainty. When faced with silence, many people rush to fill the void. They reveal additional information. They clarify things that were never questioned. They expose concerns they intended to hide. The person who remains calm during silence gains insight that others willingly surrender. This principle applies far beyond business negotiations. It applies to friendships, relationships, workplaces, and everyday interactions. The less desperate you are to control every conversation, the more information becomes available to you. The less you need to impress people, the more accurately you can evaluate them. One of the greatest psychological traps in modern life is the belief that visibility equals value. People feel pressured to constantly share updates, opinions, achievements, and personal details. They announce goals before achieving them. They seek applause before earning results. They expose dreams that are still fragile and undeveloped. Yet the Stoics would likely view this habit as dangerous. Every time you seek validation from others, you hand over a piece of your emotional independence. Your mood becomes connected to external approval. Your confidence becomes dependent on outside reactions. Your motivation becomes tied to recognition rather than purpose. Silence breaks this dependency. When you stop announcing every intention, you begin acting for yourself instead of performing for an audience. Imagine two people starting the exact same journey. The first person tells everyone about their plans. They speak endlessly about the future. They describe what they are going to achieve. They seek encouragement and admiration before any real progress has been made. The second person says very little. They quietly begin working. Day after day, they improve without broadcasting every step. Months later, the difference becomes obvious. The first person often loses momentum because talking about success creates a false sense of accomplishment. The second person builds genuine momentum because all their energy remains directed toward action. This is why silence is closely connected to discipline. Talking creates emotional satisfaction. Action creates actual results. Many people confuse the two and spend years feeling productive while remaining stuck. Marcus Aurelius spent much of his life surrounded by chaos. He ruled an empire, faced political enemies, endured wars, and confronted endless challenges. Yet when you read his reflections, you notice something remarkable. He rarely obsessed over changing others. He focused relentlessly on governing himself. That is because he understood a truth that remains relevant today. The strongest person is not the one who controls everyone around them. The strongest person is the one who controls themselves when everyone else is losing control. Silence becomes a tool for self-governance. It prevents impulsive reactions. It protects emotional energy. It creates a barrier between external events and internal peace. Consider how much suffering comes from reacting too quickly. A critical comment appears online, and someone spends hours arguing with strangers. A co-worker makes a disrespectful remark, and an entire day is ruined. A family member says something hurtful, and resentment grows for years. In each situation, the initial event may be outside your control. The reaction is not. The Stoics repeatedly emphasized this distinction because they understood that emotional mastery determines the quality of life. Most people believe power means influencing the external world. Stoicism teaches that true power begins with influencing your internal world. And silence is one of the most effective ways to do that. When you remain silent during moments of emotional intensity, you give yourself time. Time to think. Time to reflect. Time to separate facts from feelings. Time to respond wisely rather than react emotionally. This delay may seem small, but it changes everything. Entire relationships have been saved because someone chose silence for a few minutes. Entire careers have been protected because someone resisted the urge to react immediately. Entire lives have changed because someone learned to pause before speaking. The gap between impulse and action is where wisdom lives. Most people never discover this because they move too fast. Another hidden power of silence is that it strengthens self-respect. Many individuals unknowingly train themselves to seek approval. They explain every decision because they want reassurance. They justify every choice because they fear judgment. They defend every action because they are uncomfortable being misunderstood. Over time, this creates dependence. Their confidence becomes tied to other people's opinions. Their identity becomes fragile because it requires constant external support. Silence breaks this cycle. The moment you stop needing everyone to understand you, you become freer. The moment you stop requiring universal approval, you become stronger. The moment you stop explaining yourself to people who have already decided not to understand, you reclaim enormous amounts of energy. Think about some of the most respected individuals you have encountered. Chances are they were not constantly trying to convince people of their worth. They did not chase attention. They did not beg for recognition. They did not desperately seek validation. Their confidence came from within. They understood their values. They knew their purpose. They trusted their direction. As a result, they spoke with intention rather than desperation. Their words carried weight because they were not wasted. Every sentence mattered because it was chosen carefully. Silence gave power to their speech. There is also a profound connection between silence and resilience. Life inevitably brings disappointment. People will betray trust. Opportunities will disappear. Efforts will fail. Expectations will be shattered. During these moments, the temptation to complain is strong. The temptation to blame others is even stronger. Yet the Stoics believed that every challenge contained an opportunity for growth. Silence allows you to search for that opportunity. Instead of immediately reacting to adversity, you begin examining it. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you ask, "What can this teach me?" This shift changes everything. Victims focus on circumstances. Stoics focus on response. And response begins with awareness. Many people mistakenly assume that emotional strength means suppressing feelings. That is not what the Stoics taught. They did not advocate becoming emotionless. They advocated becoming emotionally intelligent. There is a difference. Suppression ignores emotions. Wisdom understands them. Silence creates the environment necessary for understanding. When you stop immediately expressing every feeling, you gain the chance to examine it. Is this anger justified, or is it insecurity disguised as anger? Is this fear based on reality or imagination? Is this frustration caused by external events or internal expectations? These questions are difficult to answer in the middle of constant noise. Silence provides the space where honest reflection becomes possible. Seneca once warned that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Modern life proves this lesson every day. People lose sleep over conversations that have not happened. They become anxious about outcomes that may never occur. They replay mistakes endlessly in their minds. Much of this suffering is amplified by mental noise. Silence interrupts that cycle. It brings attention back to the present moment. It reminds you that many fears exist only in thought. The quieter the mind becomes, the easier it is to distinguish reality from imagination. Perhaps one of the most transformative effects of silence is that it changes your relationship with loneliness. Many people fear being alone because they associate solitude with emptiness. They need constant distraction to avoid confronting themselves. The Stoics viewed solitude differently. They saw it as an opportunity to strengthen character. In silence, you discover who you are when no audience is watching. You discover what you truly value when no one is influencing your decisions. You discover whether your confidence is genuine or dependent on external validation. These discoveries are uncomfortable at first, but they are also liberating. The person who becomes comfortable with solitude gains a form of freedom that few people ever experience. This freedom creates an unexpected transformation. You stop chasing people. You stop forcing relationships. You stop begging for attention. You stop compromising your values just to belong. Why? Because silence teaches you that your worth does not depend on being chosen by others. It depends on the quality of your character. Once this realization takes root, desperation begins to disappear. Confidence begins to grow, and people notice the difference immediately. Ironically, the less you need approval, the more respect you often receive. But there is still a deeper lesson hidden beneath all of this. Because silence is not merely about what you stop doing. It is about what you begin becoming. There comes a point where silence no longer feels like restraint. It feels like strength. It feels like clarity. It feels like freedom. And when that transformation happens, you start seeing the world through completely different eyes. The final lesson reveals why the most powerful people are not those who speak the most, but those who have mastered themselves so completely that their presence alone communicates what words never could. At a certain point in life, every person faces a choice that quietly determines the direction of their future. Most never realize they are making it. The choice is not between success and failure. It is not between wealth and poverty. It is not even between happiness and unhappiness. The choice is between living reactively or living intentionally. One path is controlled by emotions, impulses, distractions, and the opinions of others. The other is guided by self-mastery, clarity, discipline, and purpose. Silence is one of the bridges that leads from the first path to the second. It is not because silence itself contains magic. It is because silence creates the conditions necessary for transformation. Without silence, it is difficult to hear your own thoughts. Without silence, it is difficult to recognize your weaknesses. Without silence, it is difficult to separate who you truly are from who the world expects you to be. Think about the person you could become if you stopped giving away your power every day. Imagine how much energy would return to your life if you no longer felt obligated to react to every criticism. Imagine how much focus you would gain if you stopped worrying about what strangers thought of you. Imagine how much peace would enter your mind if you stopped replaying every disagreement, every insult, and every moment of rejection. Most people carry invisible burdens that have nothing to do with reality and everything to do with perception. They spend years trying to manage how others see them. They exhaust themselves trying to earn approval from people who are often struggling with their own insecurities. They sacrifice their peace for validation that never truly satisfies. The Stoics recognized this trap centuries ago. They understood that external approval is unstable. It changes with trends, moods, circumstances, and personal biases. The person who builds their identity upon it will always feel vulnerable. But the person who builds their identity upon character becomes difficult to shake. There is a story that reflects this truth perfectly. A young man spent years trying to prove his worth. Every achievement was announced. Every success was displayed. Every setback felt like a personal humiliation because he feared what others might think. He constantly compared himself to people around him. If someone achieved more, he felt inferior. If someone criticized him, he became defensive. If someone ignored him, he felt insignificant. His emotional state depended almost entirely on external feedback. Then life humbled him. A major failure arrived unexpectedly. The recognition he chased disappeared. The praise he relied upon faded. The people who celebrated his victories were nowhere to be found during his struggles. For the first time, he was alone with himself. At first, it felt unbearable. The silence was uncomfortable. There were no distractions left, no applause, no validation, no audience, just reality. Yet something remarkable happened during that period of solitude. He began asking questions he had avoided for years. Who am I without recognition? What do I actually value? What kind of person do I want to become? Slowly, he stopped living for appearances. Slowly, he stopped measuring himself against others. Slowly, he stopped chasing approval. Years later, people viewed him as confident, calm, and powerful. They assumed success had changed him. The truth was the opposite. Silence had changed him long before success arrived. This transformation is available to anyone willing to embrace discomfort. The reason most people never experience it is because silence often feels difficult in the beginning. When external noise disappears, internal noise becomes louder. Doubts emerge. Fears surface. Regrets demand attention. In that moment, many people run back to distraction. They seek entertainment, gossip, endless scrolling, or meaningless conversations because they do not want to confront themselves. Yet growth begins where avoidance ends. The Stoics believed that discomfort is often the doorway to strength. Every meaningful transformation requires facing something difficult. Silence is difficult because it removes escape routes. It forces honesty. And honesty is where real change starts. One of the greatest misconceptions in modern culture is that confidence comes from constant self-expression. In reality, confidence often comes from self-possession. A person who constantly needs to announce their strength is usually trying to convince themselves. A person who constantly seeks attention is often trying to fill an internal void. Genuine confidence feels different. It is quieter. It does not need constant confirmation. It does not panic when ignored. It does not crumble when criticized. It remains steady because it is rooted in self-respect rather than public opinion. This is why silence and confidence are so closely connected. Silence teaches you to become comfortable without immediate validation. It teaches you to trust yourself even when others do not understand your choices. It teaches you to continue moving forward without requiring applause at every step. Look at nature for a moment. The deepest oceans move with immense power beneath the surface. Massive mountains stand silently for centuries. The strongest roots grow underground where nobody can see them. Nature rarely announces its strength. It simply possesses it. Human beings often do the opposite. They announce their intentions before acting. They advertise their goals before achieving them. They seek recognition before earning it. The Stoic path reverses this pattern. It encourages action before announcement. Character before reputation. Substance before appearance. Silence becomes the environment where substance is built. There is another reason silence makes you powerful that many people overlook. It protects your future. Not everyone deserves access to your dreams. Not everyone deserves access to your plans. Not everyone wants to see you succeed. Some people will discourage your ambitions because they abandoned their own. Some will project their fears onto your goals. Some will criticize what they do not understand. The more important your mission becomes, the more valuable discretion becomes. This does not mean living in secrecy or distrust. It means recognizing that fragile goals need protection during their early stages. A seed grows underground before it breaks through the surface. If exposed too early, it can be damaged before it becomes strong enough to survive. The same principle applies to personal growth. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly reminded himself that the opinions of others are fleeting. People praise one day and criticize the next. They admire one moment and forget the next. When you truly understand this, something shifts inside you. You stop treating every opinion like a verdict. You stop allowing strangers to determine your emotional state. You stop measuring your value through external reactions. Instead, you begin focusing on the only judgment that truly matters, your own assessment of whether you are living according to your values. This shift is liberating because it returns control to where it belongs, within yourself. Imagine waking up each morning without feeling the need to prove anything. Imagine working toward your goals because they matter to you, not because they impress someone else. Imagine remaining calm while others lose control. Imagine refusing to participate in unnecessary drama. Imagine carrying yourself with quiet certainty rather than constant explanation. This is the type of strength Stoicism develops. It is not flashy. It does not seek attention. It does not rely on intimidation. Yet it often commands more respect than loud displays of confidence ever could. Why? Because people instinctively recognize authenticity. They recognize when someone is grounded. They recognize when someone is not easily manipulated by praise or criticism. The older you become, the more you realize that many battles were never worth fighting. Many arguments were never worth having. Many opinions were never worth responding to. Many people were never worth convincing. Time becomes more valuable. Energy becomes more precious. Peace becomes more important. Silence helps you protect all three. It teaches you that every response is a choice. Every reaction is a decision. Every word carries a cost. Once you understand this, you become far more selective about where your attention goes. And attention is one of the most valuable resources you possess. The world will always try to pull you into noise. There will always be outrage demanding your reaction. There will always be critics demanding your defense. There will always be distractions competing for your focus. The challenge is not eliminating all noise. The challenge is maintaining inner silence despite external noise. That is where true mastery begins. Anyone can remain calm when life is easy. The real test comes when emotions are high, when pressure is intense, when circumstances are unfair, and when reactions feel justified. Those are the moments that reveal character. Those are the moments when silence becomes a weapon of wisdom rather than a sign of weakness. Epictetus taught that no person can harm your character without your permission. Think about how powerful that idea truly is. Someone can insult you, but they cannot force you to lose your composure. Someone can criticize you, but they cannot force you to abandon your values. Someone can betray you, but they cannot force you to become bitter. The final choice always belongs to you. Silence helps preserve that choice. It creates space for wisdom to enter before emotion takes control. And often that single moment of restraint changes everything. As you move forward from this point, remember that silence is not about becoming invisible. It is about becoming intentional. It is not about avoiding life. It is about engaging with life from a position of strength rather than impulse. It is not about having nothing to say. It is about ensuring that when you do speak, your words carry weight. The strongest people are rarely those who dominate every conversation. They are the ones who have learned to master themselves. They know when to speak. They know when to listen. They know when to act. They know when to wait. They understand that power is not measured by volume, but by control. So the next time someone provokes you, pause. The next time you feel the urge to explain yourself unnecessarily, pause. The next time you're tempted to seek validation, pause. In that brief moment of silence, you may discover more strength than years of argument could ever provide. Because silence is not empty. It is filled with discipline. It is filled with awareness. It is filled with self-respect. It is filled with wisdom. And once you learn how to use it, you begin walking through life differently. Calmer, stronger, more focused, more resilient, more free. If this message resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on where silence could bring more power into your life. Maybe it is in your relationships. Maybe it is in your career. Maybe it is in the battles you keep fighting inside your own mind. Wherever it is, remember this simple Stoic truth. You do not need to prove your value to everyone. You do not need to react to everything. You do not need to explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. Build your character in silence. Strengthen your mind in silence. Pursue your purpose in silence. And one day, the results will speak so loudly that no explanation will ever be necessary. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel and join a community dedicated to wisdom, discipline, resilience, and self-mastery. Leave a comment below and tell us, what is one situation in your life where silence could become your greatest source of strength? Your answer might inspire someone else who is fighting the same battle. And remember, while the world grows louder every day, the strongest minds remain calm enough to hear the truth hidden within the silence.